Hi, everyone. Welcome to this information session for the FinTech Innovation Lab, New York. I'm glad that everyone was able to join today. Today, we're going to talk about InsurTech within the FinTech Innovation Lab, New York. I just want to welcome everyone to the call. My name is Rick Bardo. I'm a managing director at Accenture, run our Northeast insurance practice, and I'm the client account lead for a number of different accounts. And so today we're going to really cover some high-level information about the program. We'll spend about 10 minutes going through some prepared content. And then we will switch over to Q&A with one of our participants from last year, True Flood Risk. And Shelly Close is on the call, and she's going to be able to answer some questions in more of an interview style. And then we'll reserve 10 minutes for some Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have questions, you can put them into the chat. And we'll do our best to answer those questions. Anything we don't get to, you can always either email Ashley or go to the information page on the website, and we'll have answers to those. So if you want to go to the next page, Ashley, that would be great. So the FinTech Innovation Lab, it's an annual program. It's a competitive 12-week program where participants are able to refine and test their value propositions. They get coaching and mentoring by world-class leading financial services firms, both insurance companies and banks, asset managers, et cetera. And it gives you a chance to test beta programs and products and other things, as well as get coaching from mentor firms that participate around how you can improve the way that you go to market, really. We can go to the next page. And so, from a program perspective, there's really three areas of value that we really try and focus on. Obviously, there's value to the participants. We want folks that get selected for this program to be able to improve their value propositions, the way they go to market, get coaching on all sorts of different things. We'll talk about those later. We have value for the participating firms. So the firms that you and the entrepreneurs and the venture funds that participate get to see more detail about the concepts that sit behind your businesses, and they get value from learning more about that and potentially at the end of the program continuing the relationship. And then the third area of value is around what we do for the greater good, right? So for New York City, especially making that a focus of innovation, right, and improving the entrepreneurial environment in New York. Some of the things that we track are investment dollars that are raised, the number of proof of concepts that we get to put out into the market and in front of the folks that participate, how many jobs we create, the partnerships that we create. You can see the things on here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the sponsors, but some of the alumni that have gone through this program are listed down here as well. So some you might be familiar with, but we've had a lot of success in this program helping startups in early and growth stages improve the way they go to market and the growth of their business. We can go to the next page. So I won't exhaust these slides. Maybe you can just leave these up here for a little bit, maybe go back, Ashley, if folks are interested in understanding, who are the mentors that they might be working with if they apply and get accepted into the program. Here are some financial firms and some more. And then we have venture funds that also participate in the program. So I've covered some of this. What do you get from the program? You'll get broad exposure to a lot of different financial institutions as you go through the application process and the selection process. But if you're selected into the program, You'll get mentorship from specific financial institutions that are interested in the value proposition behind your business. You'll get to test your products, receive feedback on those. You'll get access to not just the mentors, but to their organizations. And you'll get to test the way that you describe your products and services, and how do you go about having those conversations with potential clients. We also have, in addition to our mentors, we have entrepreneurs that have been a part of this program for a long time. Some are new, some are old, but you'll get their experience and wisdom as they guide you through this program. Prior to COVID, we also allowed or had programs that would allow folks maybe that weren't based in New York, but had business in New York, some workspace arrangements. We'll have to see how COVID plays out. We'll talk with Shelley a little bit later about how COVID impacted her experience. From a lot of the participants last year, they actually thought that it was a bonus to be able to participate remotely. It allowed them to save on costs, but also gave them more access to a lot more folks as a part of the program. And then the program takes a small warrant coverage in each participant that's selected. We can go to the next slide. And so in addition to just testing the value propositions and crisping up the way that you go to market, there's other sort of contextual discussions and concepts that you get exposed to. How do you actually structure a pilot? How do you put the customer first in terms of the value proposition of your business? How do you get beyond a meeting? How do you navigate with procurement? Not just bank, this is insurtech, so insurance procurement as well. Not that insurance procurement is any better than bank procurement, but still important. What are the regulatory and compliance environment conditions that you need to deal with? Are there considerations for your business that maybe you haven't thought about? And then I mentioned this before, you get access to senior business leaders in New York, not just at the top of an organization or top of a function, but within the mentoring organizations as well. So, they really have a vested interest. They're passionate about really looking at your business and helping you to be successful. And so how can they bring assets from their own business to the table and give you opportunities to practice your pitch, practice the business development cycle, et cetera. And then, media messaging, PR training, those are parts of the program as well. So here are some folks that are in our mentor network. I'll just put this up. I won't go through each one of these, but you can see it's a combination of banking, asset management, insurance. Someone who works in insurance, there's a lot of adjacencies to the rest of financial services. So you get that access as well. And depending on what your offering is, it could have applicability into the rest of financial services as well. And so what are the things that we're looking for? Who should apply into the program? And it's interesting. A lot of these things are staples and were staples before COVID. A lot of these have taken on new meaning with COVID, and not just in the short and midterm. COVID will go away at some point, but some of the impacts of COVID will remain in the business environment. And they're things that our clients are working hard to understand, both in terms of how do we bridge the gap today, but what are the things that are going to be remaining as a part of the business model. And so, if you think about the last digital mile to customers, that was really one break that we had an impact in over the last 12 months. How does cloud help that? cyber tech, data. How do you contextualize the relationship with the customer, with internal stakeholders? How do you create engagement with customers when you're not face to face, right? With COVID or even beyond COVID, when customers would rather self-serve. They would rather understand how they can have an experience that is driven by them. Enterprise IT, so how do you lower unit costs across the enterprise and drive integrated solutions into the environment? Future of work, we've got gig economy, we've got in the insurance world a need from carriers to become more digital, but our brokers and dealers adopting that same digital perspective, right? And so, how do you create a work environment where you've got people participating in a lot of different ways? Sustainability continues to be a very impactful area for clients. They're looking for creative, innovative ways to partner with stakeholders in the value chain around this. I think there's a few more on the next page. And automation, right? So, how do you take the rise of standardization and business intelligence, analytics, artificial intelligence, and drive that into smart automation? How do you collaborate with the stakeholders in the process? I think we covered client experience, data. Risk is another factor. The risk environment is significantly changing. Risk models of the past maybe are not incorporating some of the new risk factors or the reshuffling of the market environment, the business portfolio changes, et cetera. How do you really get to a preventative mindset as well in the risk area, not just a coverage of risk with the liability? And then how do you create new products and services that aren't just dependent on the liability portion of an insurance carrier's value proposition? Are there things that can be decoupled from that? And so, if you're on this call, these are some questions you should ask. Are you a growth stage company that's interested in entering financial services? Even if you're not in financial services right now, then this program could be for you, because you'll get mentorship on how to pivot the products and services that you're offering. Do you have at least a beta version of your technology? Because as we go through the pre-lab activity, and especially the lab activity, if you get selected, folks are going to want to be able to see the value proposition that you're describing. Do you have interest in solutions from other industries? And how are you funded today, right? So you could be at the very beginning part all the way up to Series B, right? So some key dates: applications are due on December 1st, 2020. We'll go through some finalist days. We'll go through a selection process. The short list of demos as a part of the pre-lab activity will be on February 5th, 2020. And then the program's going to start on April 2021 with a demo day. I think these dates need to be updated, but a demo day that'll be in June, right at the end of the program with the finalists. So with that, I'm going to ask Shelley, to share a little bit about true flood risk. So maybe you could start, Shelley, with just an introduction of true flood risk and yourself. I know you're the CEO and the founder, and then we'll get into some more questions around your experience with the program.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Shelley Cloza, founder and CEO of True Flood Risk. We are an AI-driven property risk management platform that helps homeowners and insurers and banks to understand, to identify, and to quantify the financial impact of flood risk. So that's what we do.
Wonderful. How did you hear about the program, the lab?
Ooh.
How did you apply to it?
Sure. So it's actually an interesting journey. I was speaking at an event in London when I had a chance to meet with some of the FinTech Lab's London representatives, and we were having a conversation talking about that program. And so I applied on behalf of our organization. And so we were actually invited to London to go through the whole process, but we were not selected. And it was brought to my attention that there was a location for InsurTech in New York. How I missed that, I don't even know. Like I had just assumed that New York was more financial services focused, and I didn't dive deep enough early enough to see the major influence that insurance actually plays as part of the InsurTech Lab. And so I was so incredibly grateful that somebody, clarified things for us. And we had an opportunity to apply in New York and go through the process. But it all started based on one conversation with a FinTech Lab representative in London.
Great, great. So what kind of expectations did you have going into the program, and how were those expectations met?
So we have participated in other accelerator-like programs. And so each one has completely, a different setup. And so we didn't really know exactly what to expect from the FinTech Lab, but I was assuming that it was going to be like some of the other experiences where it was primarily a one-way communication channel, meaning that if a carrier was interested in your technology, then there would be a match, and then you could have those conversations. With the FinTech Lab, the amount of mentorship exceeded all of our expectations. I didn't realize when they talk about the mentorship piece of the FinTech Lab, it is such a critical part and really what makes the program stand out and be different from any other program that we have come across in our experiences. And so I think that also the part about, Rick mentioned that you are teamed with a number of companies, and that was again a really great opportunity to see, not just be partnered with one company or two companies, but a handful of, we had 6, and we had an opportunity to really see the nuances and to work within each of those different organizations was fantastic.
That's one of the most consistent pieces of feedback we get from participants. A lot of them have participated in other programs before, but they said that two-way mentorship, right, above and beyond anything else, any other value that they got out of the program, actually getting that genuine, right, genuine interest in your success mentorship in the program, two-way interaction was one of the things that is one of the most consistent pieces of feedback when you ask folks what exceeded your expectation. So I'm glad to hear that you had that same thing. I know you did because we've talked before, but
it's interesting though, because when people when they hear about mentorship, right, they're like, oh, mentorship, you're not really going to get a lot out of it, right? But it's really true in this case. And for us, it was a game changer for really helping us get to the next level of where we want to be. So again, the great thing about the FinTech Lab is that there are so many different companies, as Rick was saying, at different points of their journey, right? Early, stage and that growth stage. And there's really a need for everyone. And there's different experiences and different expectations that you can get out of it, so.
I remember first learning about your business during the application process. It was that first sort of in-person presentation. And I remember saying, wow, that is something that I haven't seen before. And, it got my head spinning around, even though you weren't selected as a finalist yet, around how would we do that with a client, right? How would true flood risk play a role? So, one thing I'd be interested in understanding is, if you had never been selected as a finalist and just gone through the application process up to the point of being selected as a finalist, what kind of value would that have had for you?
Well, I think that every single founder would agree that the opportunity to tell your story and to put your name and offering on a company's radar is so important, even in the early stages of your company. To be in a room full of executives who really were interested, and really, I have to admit that that very first pitch meeting, right? So even before the demo day, when you're invited in, come prepared. Just expect the unexpected. You know, so for example, we are a flood solution, right? So you can actually go online, type in an address, and get your property's flood risk. You know, especially this, our signature solution is the structural height of houses, called first floor height. And in the middle of our demo, of our pitch, one of the executives registered and looked up his house. And after my presentation, he was like, "Yeah, this is right." And I was just like, I was sweating for him, because those, you know, those live moments is like, okay, is this going to work? Is this going to play off? And it was like, I'm like, whew, this is fantastic. But to get to Rick's question, you know, it's really the opportunity to introduce your technology. Because here's the thing, a lot of companies may not be ready for your solution today, but it's going to get them to start thinking. So even if you are not invited to the demo day, you have to realize to even make it to the initial round is such a major accomplishment. Again, I'm based in New York, so it made it a little bit easier for me to participate in the New York lab, but I was willing to have my team commit to be in London, because we know what the value is of the FinTech Lab program and what you get out of it.
Right. I remember that experience, seeing you guys for the first time, and we were in a big boardroom, and there was probably 20 or 25 people sitting around the table watching, and you know, and there's a lot of probing questions around, you know, what's the product, what's the service, how does it fit, you know, how do you see it fitting with the client? So I think it was a really good experience. What was some of the feedback once you got accepted as a finalist? What was the type of feedback that you got? What was most helpful to you, the type of feedback that you got?
Sure. Well, you noticed in my introduction, I said that True Flood Risk was an AI-driven property risk management platform. 6 months ago, I would have introduced True Flood Risk as a property data company. Mm-hmm. And that was the biggest pivot for us. It was really understanding what we were offering. You have to realize that flood is so incredibly narrow, right? It's not going to connect with every single person. But that is the great thing about the FinTech Lab, is that you can come in with a solution that is so specialized that maybe there's only, you know, a few partners that might be the right fit for it, but there's a place for you. And as you know, Rick was showing on that slide of all the different areas of emphasis, I mean, I looked at it and I'm like, okay, we're a data provider, so we're gonna, you know, go under that platform, under that application. But during these mentorship programs, you know, during these conversations, especially with the executives and residents, we really uncovered what is the essence of what we're offering. And it's not just data. The data is a catalyst for what comes next. So we were almost underselling what our platform was. And it wasn't until we had these deep dive conversations with the financial institution partners, our chaperones, as well as the mentors, the executive in residence, that we were really able to flesh it out. So that for us was some of the biggest feedback in terms of, and you have to go in with an open mind, right? Like you have to, you know, if we really only wanted to be a property data company, I would still introduce ourselves as that. But I realized that in terms of longevity of where we are today and where we want to be a few years from now, that change of messaging was so entirely needed to help articulate what we do.
That's great. You know, I mentioned that we run a InsurTech and a FinTech track simultaneously. And I know you came in on the InsurTech track, but you got lots of exposure, even mentoring, right? Some of the mentors weren't just insurance companies. How did that broader context of the lab impact you and impact the True Flood Risk products and services?
So when we went into the lab, we were so focused on being in the insurance space. We were kind of like, really almost narrow-minded ourselves of like who would use our data. We figured risk mitigation experts, we figured contractors, we figured insurers would need it. We had never even really seriously looked at risk managers and asset managers. And it was the lab who identified this new use case for our technology. It was Maria, it was her entire team who identified the special place that we had for some of the financial, the FinTech company, for the financial institution partners. So really from a trading side, if anyone's doing some sort of, REIT or mortgage-backed securities, this data is so incredibly needed to kind of, help provide granular level information about properties and to help them better understand risk for their portfolios. So it was really the lab who helped us start to expand our area of focus, and that introduction to some of the financial, again, some of the partners really helped, and we got to actually do real, comprehensive, POCs that are still being evaluated to this day as for potential, full enterprise integration. That was, tremendous for us.
Oh, that's great. A couple of things that resonated in what you said was, you have to be sort of humble, right? So that you can get the most out of the lab. You need to be introspective, right? Around what your business is and what it could be, right? So that you're open to the feedback. One of the things that we ask participants is not to sell during the process. So, do you agree with that statement, not to go and try and sell during the process? And why do you think it's important?
So I think as a founder, you're always selling.
Right.
So,
It's hard. It's hard. I know.
I think that how you approach the companies that you're partnered with, it can grow into, sales opportunities, down the road. But I think the most important piece is to use this opportunity as a mentorship conversation to understand what else are you missing? What else could you do to enhance your offering? So for example, we had a number of features on our dashboard, and clients came back to us after demoing it, after going through introductions and starting to play around with it themselves, that they gave us their wish list. So it was like usability testing. It's like paying for, I'll give an example. We used to pay with early, versions of UI work, $5,000-$10,000 to get feedback from potential users, right? You have them. You have their full attention. You have the senior management. You have everyone who's trying to help you enhance your platform, whatever it might be. And that is remarkable.
That's great. How has your participation in the lab impacted your business?
Well, the interesting thing is I'm going to have to focus on the marketing piece as well from the lab. Obviously, the Accenture FinTech Lab has such a tremendous reputation. The association with the lab has been remarkable to this day, right? So we had our demo day in June. All the materials are available on YouTube, and we still get inquiries as a result of people finding us through the Accenture, FinTech Labs website, being redirected to the YouTube thing, and then they end up, reaching out to us. So it has been not only from the partners that we were, working with. We're still having dialogue with several of them. I think that you're going to find over time that there are going to be certain companies that are a better fit for your technology today, but you're going to also want to keep those relationships with everyone that you've met in the lab, because again, it's all about timing. It's all about figuring out, where they are, where are they. For example, flood, not everyone is prioritizing flood right now. We know down the road, they have agendas to include flood, but it may not be a priority in this given moment. So you want to keep those relationships as active as possible. So for us, it's about, the reoccurring presence of being a part of the FinTech Lab, you have to remember that it's not just a 3-month program. You're part of the entire ecosystem. You know, one of the executive in residence offered to introduce us, connected us with a few of the FinTech Lab participants from previous years. And so now we're trying to find ways to partner together and work together. So it's an entire ecosystem that goes beyond the 12-week program.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's important. And you mentioned earlier, sort of expect the unexpected, or being able to pivot. I know during the last season, right, of this, I worked with a couple of the participants. One asked me to spend time with their organization, basically giving a program project management 101 to their organization, because they were needing that skill more, and they had some folks that they were asking to do program and project management for clients, and so we did that. Another one was a FinTech startup that was in the program that recognized some adjacencies in InsurTech, and so I spent an hour and a half giving an insurance overview to the organization as well. So it's not just about that kind of mentorship. There's also learning opportunities, and if you need to dial that up during the program, then that happens as well. You know,
I think that's a really great point too, because there was a number of other topics. You mentioned procurement earlier on, some marketing pieces. So there's a lot more areas that founders and members can dive into it and work on. So it's a tremendous opportunity.
How was the remote or the virtual experience of the lab? How did that work? I mean, I know we went into it thinking that it would be in person, and then we had to really quickly switch to a remote format. How did that impact?
Yeah.
You got
well, the fact that the lab took place was pretty awesome, because it would have been very easy to say, hey, listen, we need to postpone this because of COVID, but not at all. Like, it was full steam ahead. I feel like actually having the remote format, as you mentioned in your introduction, gave us an opportunity to have more meaningful conversations, perhaps have access to senior leadership who may not have necessarily participated, if they were in-person conversations, harder to get on their calendar because they're traveling and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I feel like you had a lot in time. You were able to have much more participation. I think in the early days, and let's be honest, people were just trying to figure out, how to dial into their VPN or whatever. So, we had one client who didn't even know how to give, external audiences, access, because they had a firewall with, MS Teams or what have you. So I think once we got past that initial hurdle of, the crisis, I think that people, were able to start getting into their, really starting to perform and find ways, to work together. And I think that, for the next class, the next group, I think that by then everyone, even if it is a virtual format, I feel that the companies, the startups, the startups are always ready for, remote work and remote, conversations anyway. Mm-hmm. I think that there'll be a lot more seamless cohesion, if you will. But I think the virtual format was honestly, like, it was great. I mean, it was, you got to be a far more, efficient with your time. As you said, less travel costs for those who were from out of town. And you still got to have, meaningful, conversations, throughout the journey.
What advice would you give folks that are on this call that are thinking, should I participate? Should I apply or not?
I encourage you to apply. Even if you have, your Series A and you have a tight strategy and you feel as though maybe you feel as though you're kind of beyond the accelerator stage, I encourage you to kind of, rethink that approach, because you're going to get something out of it. Even if maybe it's just, confirmation that your solutions, are, it's the right approach. It's introductions. It's having access to senior leaders, to having access to the financial institutions who maybe you haven't had a chance to have conversations to. And I encourage you to apply. And if you're not accepted for the next round, apply again, because you will find, like in our case, it took us, 2 times for different locations. You have to make sure that, as I said, some companies may not be ready in this moment for your solution, but things might change as they start to hear more about what's available.
Great. Last question. What advice would you give folks on how to apply, right? Like during the application process, if folks are thinking, how can applicants make their application process more effective to increase the chances that they'll get selected for the program?
I would say be very clear, be very succinct in how you position yourself. Be honest, be totally transparent about what you're hoping to get out of the program. Share demos of your technology. Again, you might be introducing something that the partners, that the financial institution partners might not be ready for, and you need to help communicate that so you can raise your visibility and the consideration.
Terrific. That's great. We anything else you want to offer? We have a few questions that I can get to, but
yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm going to be, for us, it's not just the FinTech Lab, it's the entire ecosystem. I'm telling you, like, we still talk to some of the other companies who were in our class. It was hard for us to meet each other because of COVID, and of course we had a few social events online, which of course are never the same as having a drink in person. But to be able to, there's a number of companies that I have no problems picking up the phone and bouncing ideas off of them, and that is such a wonderful environment to be around, because you have all of these individuals, right? Like, I mean, many of them had no idea about flood, but they want to help. They want to help network, and if they know of somebody, they're more than willing to connect you to help foster this creative energy that we have.
Here's a question that came in, and maybe I'll pose it to you first, Shelley, but someone asked, would you be able to provide examples of pilots coming out of the program? So for you, did you have pilots that came out of the program?
Yes. So I can say names, right? Is that the deal of how you guys feel?
Let's just leave the names out for now.
Okay. So we're actually working with one insurer in particular, where we were able to look at an entire book of business and come up with the property data that they needed, that they can then include in their underwriting approach. So the idea of our data, so our data has a few different touch points. It can help with marketing, it can help with pre-filling online applications, and it can also help really with the underwriting engine with risk selection and costing and so forth. And so we were finding in our conversations with this one particular insurer, we decided to do our POC on the underwriting side. And so we're actually still working with them to this day, and trying to find out ways to bring our data into other parts of the organization. But I do strongly recommend that when you are having those initial conversations, and there's an agreement that you're going to have a POC with a client. And the thing is, you have to realize that you may not have a POC with every single partner that you've been matched with. And again, because it could be a fit, it could be maybe there's not the need on their side right now. And in those cases, you have to use those for really truly the mentorship piece, where they can actually at least help you to find new ways of enhancing your platform. So even if you don't come out with a POC with a particular financial institution partner, there's still a lot more that you can get out of that connection, if you will. But when you do have a POC with a client, I do strongly recommend that you have an understanding of what the expectation is, right? What, if you decide to do, if it's a free POC, and that you're incurring a lot of cost, you're incurring a lot of labor and maybe imagery expenses or cloud computing expenses to execute this, right? Just have an understanding of what will you get out of that experience. Will you get feedback? Will you be happy with that? We try to have basically a feedback form, like, and having them commit to completing that. So you at a minimum, if they choose to pass on your technology down the road, you have key learning that you can take and apply and benefit from that POC engagement.
Yeah, and I think every series of mentorship conversations, that's part of what they're going to work with you on, is how would a pilot be structured. But I think it's very frequent that the participants actually end up doing pilots with some of the mentoring organizations as well. So
yeah.
True Flood Risk isn't the only one. Another question: how many startups in average are coming from outside of the U.S.? Don't quote me on. I think it's about 30%. Jade might know. I know you're on, Jade. So
hi. Yes, I can answer that. It's actually more about 1 to 2 companies per cohort. For class of 2020, we had a company come out of Canada and another company based in the UK. I think 2 years back, we even had a Portuguese company. And for the future applicants, how you should think about that is which location you decide to apply to should really depend on where you want your business to expand to. So for example, if you are a non-US based company looking to learn more about New York finance sector and be directly mentored by New York finance sector leaders, then our lab is perfect for you. If on the other hand, you're a New York based company looking to expand into the London ecosystem, the London lab will be a better fit for you. But that said, last thing I want to add is we are running virtually again this year. And this time we actually know that it's going to be virtual before we launch. So we are lifting the requirements. We used to require companies to physically relocate to New York City. That is no longer the case for the coming year. So we expect more applications to come in from our global audience. So that rate, we expect that to change a little bit. And we're actually, frankly, looking forward to that as well.
Okay, terrific. And then maybe this is another one for you, Jade. How closely historically do the VCs work with the portfolio companies?
I'll actually leave Shelley to answer her experience and add further color after.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are just starting to raise now. We're just starting to have those conversations. So we're actually in contact with some of the VCs who are partners with the FinTech Lab. So I think that it all depends on where you are in your fundraising journey. They certainly are more than willing to have conversations, with you. I don't believe, if I remember correctly, you're not in the lab. You let them know that you're fundraising, right? But you don't necessarily have conversations in the lab. Is that how it works for active investments? And then it has to wait until the lab ends?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe could you explain that to them? Maybe just that could help clarify.
Yeah, I can help provide a little more color on that. So given that our lab is largely focused on building that relationship between direct mentorship from financial institutions with startups, we do involve VCs more on the side of VCs provide direct feedback when we're trying to build demo day videos, and we can also book like separate meetings to think about the pitch. And the great thing about the lab is once you're in the community, even after you graduate and become an alum, you're in our network. So next time you're raising, you can always hit us up and say, hey, we're raising Series B or C, and we'll be happy to make the introduction to all the VC connects that we have. But I would say the majority of mentorship is more focused on financial institutions rather than the VCs. Not to say that VCs aren't important. They provide valuable feedback when it comes to pitches.
Yeah, and like I say, after the lab, they're more than willing to have conversations. So.
We have one last question that came in, and then we're sort of up against time here. But the question was, how long did the application process take with write-ups, videos, and other things? I would say that it generally depends on where you are in the maturity of your business. So whether you have some of these things already at hand, versus whether you have to develop them for the application process. But I'll ask Shelley to comment on that as well.
I think, and again, I mean, many of you founders probably know that, and if you do, apply for things, you have a starting point, right? You have a framework of, what your offering is. What is that big one-liner of what you are and your key point of differentiation? So the actual application, I think I wrote it, I circulated it to the team, and then I sat on it, I thought about it, and then I went back and I reworked it again, and I added, a few links to product demos. So I think all in all, at least a solid week or two, but it wasn't all in one. I sat on it and I wanted to think about it and make sure that we were putting our best foot forward into the application, because again, it is competitive, but again, this is the program that you want to be a part of. For so many reasons that I have, cited before. So take the time on your application. And it also will help you prioritize how you see yourselves today and where you see yourselves in the future.
Terrific. Well, Shelley, I want to thank you for joining today and sharing your experience. Ashley and Jade, thank you for supporting this information session. And if you have additional questions, you can go to the website and reach out. I hope to see a lot of you participating and applying for the program. It's going to be another great year. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.